Hello and welcome to the Nationals podcast. Today I'm joined by my colleague Steph Braun and I'm Abby Garton-Crosby, and we're going to talk you through some of the big stories that have happened over the weekend and some of our coverage and what's been going on. And so how are you doing today, Steph, before we kick off?
Yeah, I'm good. I've just had a great lentil soup for lunch,
We were
which is really
discussing.
kind of we were discussing. No, it was just what I needed. I felt a bit drowsy this morning.
Yeah.
I think these dark mornings are starting to get to me. It is really dark now. It just never. I never seem to get over it year to year.
Yeah, I don't like it either. And I also have lentil soup for lunch after the podcast, though, so I like how we've dialed up on that today. Yeah, except mine's tinned. I'm not as fancy as Steph, who got it from a shop. Today, so one kind of key story that's happened over the weekend is Reform UK's leader Nigel Farage was in Parliament in Falkirk, which is very interesting. One of our colleagues, Jamie, has a really interesting write-up about everything that happened at the event, which you can read on our website in case he was there, because we weren't. But one kind of key thing that did happen is that we had yet another defection from the Scottish Tories to Reform, but this time it was a peer. So it was a Lord Malcolm Offord of Garvel, who was made a peer by Boris Johnson's government. I know quite a lot about Malcolm Offord. We'll get into that in a moment. But, what was your reaction to that? Obviously, whenever Farage comes up, we do tend to get something like that, and it's usually from the Tories.
Yeah, to be honest, I'd actually forgotten that there might be a defection. And when it sort of came up, I was like, oh yeah, as if I didn't think about him pulling that out the bag sort of thing, because he always kind of has done in these situations. But yeah, Malcolm Offord, I wasn't overly surprised when I saw his name. I mean, I suppose it's a bit of a surprise in terms of slightly in terms of his politics. I've been reading his Telegraph column this morning. You'd think it was maybe a bit of a surprise with regards to that, but he has always struck me as a man who's sort of desperate to have more relevance than he actually has. He's appeared on Question Time quite a lot, and I don't know about you viewers out there, but I think he's always a guy that sort of appears and you think, who is that again? So yeah, he's been a peer for some time now, and I guess he seems to be frustrated at the way that the Scottish Tories have become kind of obsessed with the constitutional question. He obviously has a pop at the SNP for being obsessed with that, but he also says the Scottish Tories have been kind of bogged down in that as well. And that's why he's coming in saying, we need more policies, we need more ambition, or they need more ambition, and I'm joining Reform because of that.
What's funny about that is that he says that, and Graham Simpson, who's Reform's current MSP in Holyrood, has basically admitted a couple of weeks ago that Reform's only got two policies, which is immigration and net zero. So obviously he's seen an opportunity to kind of get in there and get his stamp on that, which is maybe not getting in the Tories at the moment. And also what's interesting about that, you saying about him being obsessed with the Constitution, that's where the Tories get most of their vote from, is from people who don't want another referendum.
Yeah.
So I can kind of understand why the Tories get bogged down in that, because it's probably quite a large part of their voting.
Yeah, because as soon as they start talking about policy, that's when it's got a problem on the train.
Yeah. It's in the problem. I know, I think there was like a grasping the thistle policy paper I went to. I might have been under Douglas Ross.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is actually in this? There's not a lot to it. But what's interesting about Malcolm Offord is obviously he was made a peer under Boris Johnson so that he could go into the Scotland office and be a minister. But he had donated £150,000 to the Tories right before that. And he didn't get elected as an MSP in 2021, for those of you who remember the last Holyrood election. And he's on the Lothian list. I think he was number 5, so I don't know why he thought he would get elected at number 5 on the list. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. So he went into the Scotland office, stayed there for a little bit, and then he moved on to the Department of Business and Trade. And then in order to fill his job, they put Donald Cameron, who was an MSP at the time, into the House of Lords so then he could do the job, just because there are obviously not a lot of Scottish Tories down in Westminster. But I just think it's interesting that he was saying he wanted to come off the benches, and this whole thing about Reform being anti-establishment, but I don't think he can get much more establishment than Malcolm Offord.
No.
He's a millionaire financier. He works in banking. He's a member of the House of Lords. He's been a junior minister in the government.
Yeah.
You're not exactly screaming radical to me when I look at Malcolm Offord's LinkedIn history.
No, are they going to get Alistair Jack next? I don't think any more, these establishment types. Yeah. I mean, in his Telegraph column, he was talking about devolution has not delivered the improvement Scots were led to expect. Economic growth has been sluggish. Now, Anas Sarwar was talking about economic growth a few weeks ago, saying the Scottish Parliament wasn't doing enough on it, and it's failed in that regard, and there's too much social policy. The Scottish Parliament has minimal economic powers, and I think the UK government wants it that way, and it was kind of set up to be a social policy parliament. So there's this, he's kind of joined this sort of gaslighting mission where, unionist politicians seem to be trying to convince people that the Scottish Parliament has powers that it doesn't have. So yeah, economic growth, I don't know what he's talking about there really, because I really don't think the Scottish Parliament have many levers at all to try and, shift that at all.
Yeah, of course, and then everything that they do is impacted by what happens down.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's very interesting. I wrote up yesterday when this came out because I was working on Sunday. I looked at how much Malcolm O'Rourke claimed in expenses in the last 7 months that is available, because the Lord's expenses, frustratingly, are like 5 or 6 months behind.
Yeah.
So you can only really get up until June 2025 at the minute. I go on about the House of Lords expenses to you all the time. As you know, I'm tracking a lot of people.
You are a fan.
I am. So I pulled out his, and he made £34,340 in 7 months on expenses. And you can see the breakdown of that on our website if you want to find out more.
But he's anti-establishment.
Of course, anti-establishment.
Yeah, just...
But 34 grand from the taxpayer when you're a millionaire. So gotta get that bank. But yeah, aside from reform, John Swinney was at an event in Glasgow this morning. Our colleague Xander was there, and he's kind of caught us up on what happened just before we came in here. But the kind of key thing that was talking about was energy bills, wasn't it? Could you tell us a little bit about what John Swinney said?
Yeah, so he's talking about how I think that he's saying that independents can reduce your energy bills by a third. Is that what he was? Yeah, that was a stat they came up with. So this kind of follows on from a paper that they started. Well, they released, I think, in October, saying that Scottish households could be more than £10,000 better off per year under independence. They're coming out with these lines now. We've heard we've done a number of articles. I've done a number of articles on zonal pricing, focusing on how Scotland's energy bills could be much fairer if the UK was split up into regions, because Scotland produces so much energy, but then seems to pay so much money for energy, because there's all sorts of problems, like the renewable energy hasn't got anywhere to go if there's too much for the grid and things like that. So that's kind of what he was talking about. They seem to be, the SNP, I think, are heading down the right road, sort of, in terms of we need to talk about the why of independence and not the how.
Yeah.
I think that people have concluded that we need to stop talking about process and how we get a referendum. There's a lot of people out there that need convincing about this before we talk about that. So I think they're heading down the right road, but I think there does need to be a bit more substance. I find them coming out with these these policies, these reasons why independence would be better, but I'm constantly thinking, how am I going to feel this? Like, how is this going to affect my everyday life? And I think that they need to kind of keep working on that message, I think.
Exactly. I mean, it's quite a bold move, especially when Labour at the general election were promising that bills are going to come down, and we've seen them go up, and there was a little bit in the budget they would come down, but they were promising that they'd come down by £350, which they have not. And as someone whose direct debit has just gone up in the middle of winter, it's something that impacts everybody, our energy bills, like especially when we're trying to shift over to renewables. And John Swinney had also said he'd accused Keir Starmer of risking becoming a second Thatcher to Scotland, which is a kind of really interesting line about basically how the deindustrialisation of the oil and gas industry. We've seen jobs being lost. We saw Grangemouth. We saw the Harbour Energy. 100 jobs go in. And it's all this sort of row that I talked last week about the windfall tax and the energy companies are paying. But it also is about the just transition and making sure that we're using renewable energy as well as putting the workers into renewable energy. And it's really kind of, you can tell that John Swinney's kind of playing into that deindustrialisation, like what happened with the coal mines when that was just Margaret Thatcher just shut them all. And it's still impacting communities in Scotland today. So it's a very interesting one to see where the SNP's energy policy is going on this, because it's been a bit different than what it was under Nicola Sturgeon, where there was no more oil and gas, whereas John Swinney's, he's saying that there should be climate checks. It's not as strong. So it's really interesting to see where they're going, and as you said, about explaining to people how that could actually impact their lives with independence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it makes sense to focus on energy, because it's one of the things that people seem most angry about under Labour, given that the promises that they made. And it'll be interesting to see what the next thing they come out with is, really, the SNP.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know that Hannah Mary Goodlad, who's the SNP Shetland candidate, was with John Swinney at the event today, and I'd spoken to her about a story that's going to run over the Christmas period. And one of the things she was talking to me about is how Shetland really does get forgotten. It's really such a key part of the energy infrastructure. Because of their position. There's a lot of oil and gas fields off there, big giant wind farm. And GB Energy last week forgot to put Shetland on a map of its key strategy about energy. And GB Energy, for those who don't know, is the UK government's public energy company, which is about, the future of energy company. Yeah. And they forgot to put Shetland, which is a key part of the energy industry, on a map. Yeah. So it's not the first time that's happened. For those who subscribe to our newsletter, I did go through all the times that Shetland has been forgotten. Orkney gets forgotten too.
It's put in a box.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that Westminster forgets about most of Scotland past the border, once you get past the actual mainland, even worse. So that's very funny for those who want to read it.
It was funny that John Swinney was talking about Thatcher and calling Keir Starmer as being like Thatcher. It was Anna Sowell last week, wasn't it? That was saying John Swinney was done what Thatcher couldn't do to the NHS. So she's getting brought up quite a bit. It goes to show how much impact she's had on society today.
I think in Scotland that you can still credibly use a Thatcher reference, even though I think she had such an impact on Scotland with the poll tax and all those Tory policies that she is really the big bad of Scotland, for sure. A Margaret Thatcher reference. Talking about the right wing, I think just as a segue into, we've got our colleague Xander in this week's Sunday National, but you can still read them online. Has done a couple of stories about X, formerly known as Twitter, and Elon Musk. And I thought it was really interesting because he set up a new account where he basically kind of set it up as a 15-year-old boy. And he was kind of instantly fed right-wing posts. I mean, are you surprised by that?
Not particularly, no. Yeah. I mean, I look back on when I first set up a Twitter account. I still call it Twitter, so I know it's called X, but it's just, I mean, it's ingrained in people's vocabulary, isn't it? Tweeting, Twitter. But I mean, if I look back when I first set up my Twitter account, it must have been about 2010, 2009-ish. Because it was a bit after I'd set up a Facebook account, I think.
Yeah, Facebook's 2008.
Yeah, so I think it must have been not too long after that, maybe 09, 10, that sort of time. And it was completely different to what it is now. You obviously had the 140 characters. It was very much a sort of place where people just posted opinions. It wasn't really a news platform at that time. Yeah. And it's changed. It is unrecognizable now, as Xander says. And I'm not overly surprised at the content that he was instantly fed. It's coming from this For You panel that now appears on Twitter. There's a For You and following. You'd think that the following panel would be for you because you have chosen to follow those people, but then Twitter also likes to sort of think, oh well, I think you might be interested in this because you've been saying this and you've been talking to this person, and so they put together a column which should probably just be called other things you might be interested in.
Because you're supposed to want to be interested in.
I don't know. It didn't surprise me. What did surprise me, I think, or I just find really mad, is that when it was suggested to Xander who he should follow, Elon Musk was right at the top.
I had to mute him because I muted Elon Musk on Twitter a long time ago. It was infuriating me that he was in my For You thing all the time. Like, I literally couldn't get away from the man. I was like, I don't care what he has to say.
No.
I don't want to hear it. So there's a couple, I don't block people because I'm like, you know what, sometimes I might want to see them, but I will mute. I will mute people, and I've muted Elon Musk.
It's a great function.
It is a good function. But yeah, I'm not surprised by that either. And I've kind of stopped really using it. I use it to kind of whatever scroller lurker type situation on it.
Yeah, I don't
post on it anymore.
I do post on it sometimes, but usually you'll find me spouting sporting opinions on there.
Yeah,
that's mostly what I do, and then I share my stories. That's largely what I do. But yeah, I suppose it's a bit like I don't use Facebook very much anymore, but I find Twitter is a little bit not ingrained in my life, but I found it quite difficult to separate from it completely because it is still quite useful for news.
Yeah, I deleted it on my phone and I have it on my work laptop so that if there's something going on and you're looking for a reaction or stuff, and I check a couple places in the morning, I'm lurking. I'm not really in like engaging in it really. And I think that's interesting because I know a lot of people obviously moved over to things like Blue Sky.
Which is becoming increasingly useful for news, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, and also a lot of people are on like Instagram and Threads as well. So there are alternatives to it out there now, which is interesting. But it's quite interesting what's happened to it since Elon Musk's taken over. So Sandra also had a story about Good Law Project have lodged a complaint with Ofcom. about unlawful content on X that's been untouched by moderators. And basically, I mean, I'm not going to repeat what has been posted on some of the things, but it is explicit racism and things like that are on there. Is pretty awful. And then last week, Musk was fined by the EU. Well, X was fined by the EU.
Yeah.
120 million euro fine was imposed. So this is under the Digital Services Act, which JD Vance and the Americans do not like this. They call it censorship, essentially. But basically, they've been looking into X for a couple of years now, and they've said that the blue check mark's deceptive. Because remember when we used to have it as journalists, you had to go through the whole rigmarole to get verified. Now you just pay money for it. So, I mean, anybody could do that. So that was part of the fine. And also they're saying that the advertising library lacks transparency because researchers and stuff can't access the data like as required by law. So God knows what's going on behind the scenes. But yeah, it's interesting to see how, as you said, like a thing that was really kind of part of our lives has now been changed so much.
Yeah,
under Elon Musk.
It really has. And some of the posts, I won't repeat them either, but some of the posts that have just had no action taken on them, it's just, as you say, explicit racism. And I do have concerns about younger kids seeing this sort of stuff, because I think we, some of the subject matters that are being covered in some of these posts, I think that we are probably more, because of how our parents, grandparents, and the generations that they grew up in, we're probably more aware of how horrendous this sort of language is. But I do worry about sort of 10-year-old, 12-year-old kids seeing that and just not understanding the level of how bad that racism is. Like, so yeah, it's very concerning, and you can read Xander's story if you want to see some of the things that
it's very interesting. Obviously, where that's going. So said, I haven't gone away from it completely, because I think, you still need to see what's going on there. I'm not going to completely block myself out of it, but yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, very.
Anyway, we will also move on. So a wee story's come out this morning. Basically, just kind of briefly go over this, that Labour Together, which is a big think tank that was run by Starmer's chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, doesn't run it anymore, but was kind of really instrumental in getting Starmer to win leadership campaign, has been canvassing activists for their views on his replacement. What do you think about that?
I'm not overly surprised. I mean, Keir Starmer was picked as this figure who was going to ensure the left were cleared out of the Labour Party, basically, and in terms of leadership, at least. I mean, there are still some left MPs in the Labour Party yelling quite a lot, But it's my understanding he was never really meant to lead the party in government. That wasn't really the idea. And the general election happened. They got that massive majority. And I think Labour Together have realised now that Starmer doesn't have the charisma or the political nous required to do this job. And they're heading for what I think is a point of no return. We've seen what's happened to the Tories in terms of how irrelevant they've become since, the days of Boris and Liz Truss, who that's reappeared recently.
She has
chat about that.
Yeah.
So we've seen what's happened to the Tories and the way that they've become totally irrelevant in politics, and people are thinking, are they ever going to be able to sort of come back amid reform and things? So that is going to happen to Labour too. The pace of their decline is astonishing, and I think Labour Together is maybe starting to realise that now.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a survey to activists. So I think in the story it said that, obviously Starmer and stuff weren't aware of this. So I think they're kind of just canvassing activists to see. They were asking basically to rank kind of other ministers, like where they would be most likely to vote for them. So you're talking Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who's repeatedly denied that he's challenged Keir Starmer for leadership. Repeatedly, apparently. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, Education Secretary. Basically, all the kind of top ministers that you kind of see around Starmer, Angela Rayner, and then Andy Burnham as well. So I think it's interesting that this is just not going away for Starmer, is it? Like, there's constant rumblings about when he's going to get challenged for his leadership. We had that absolutely shambolic briefing last month where they were like saying that there was a leadership coup coming. They briefed against Wes Streeting, and then it all sort of went absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
I just think it's not going away. I think he will be lucky to last to the May elections at this point.
Yeah, I do as well, because I think that people are aware that, they must be aware that that they're going to lose Wales.
Oh,
and that is the end.
It's who they lose Wales to.
Yeah, it's who they lose Wales to, and if it's not the end before that, Wales will. Well, you can't continue to to lead the Labour government at Westminster when you're the one that's lost Wales, which is just has been even more staunchly Labour than Scotland over the years. So yeah, I think that they are coming to the realization that this can't continue. It's just he's not the guy, and it's just it still gets me how he just doesn't have any. When you look for like funny expressions that politicians make, when you need one that's appropriate for your story, you always find ones from Anas Sarwar. Every week he's pulling faces at First Minister's questions, which is gold.
Barrage, comic gold sometimes.
Exactly. Keir Starmer, nothing. Yeah. He's just got the one expression.
Yeah.
And I remember John Curtis saying that I think Keir Starmer has lasted as long as he has because he has this appearance of seeming completely unflappable by any crisis that occurs, which is a talent, I suppose. Yeah. But at the same time, there's just
a lack of emotion.
Lack of emotion. There's no charisma there. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, as you were saying, they had this massive majority of the last election. I just think it's really interesting that we're moving. I think we're moving away from two-party politics. Like, I don't think
we're not.
The next election is going to be like it used to and has been historically, is the Tories versus Labour, because we've got the Greens on the left of Labour and we've got Reform on the right of the Tories. I think we're going to see a complete change to our party politics Westminster-wise by the time the next election comes around. I mean, as you said about politicians with personality, that's why Zach Polanski's cutting through.
Absolutely, yeah.
It is resonating with voters, and he's not robot Starmer man.
Starmer.
Great. No, what Starmer.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yeah. So aside from that, we'll obviously keep you updated on what is going on with that, and I wouldn't be surprised if it a Labour leadership election for the next 6 months. Let's put it that way. But we do have one little story to finish off with, which is talking about the World Cup. And Scotland's, whether or not we're going to get extended pub hours for Scotland's matches, which I have become a champion of this cause, even though as a mother with a toddler, I will not be able to attend the pub, but I believe that everybody else should be allowed to.
Yeah.
So basically what happened is the Scottish Pub and Beer Association have been calling for licensing hours to be extended during the matches because we got the first draw of matches that we're going to get, don't we?
Yeah.
So you're obviously more into sport than me. I am just here for the World Cup.
But that's the point. That's one of the points, that everyone is here for the World Cup. It doesn't matter if you're a big follower of football or not. Everyone kind of piles in for the World Cup. And that is why I think it's important that licensing hours are extended, because I know we've got to be wary of, people's drinking habits and things like that, and not, trying to ensure that there's minimal trouble caused. But this is a really important moment for Scotland, and I think that we've seen how everybody came together and was coming into work the next day and talking about nothing else apart from, beating Denmark and getting into the World Cup. And I think that this moment we have to make the most of it. Yeah. And I think that allowing people to see matches in pubs is important, because it's not, yes, everybody can watch the matches at home, but it's there's something very special about being together with a load of people you don't know, hugging strangers when there's goals scored. There's something very wholesome and uplifting about it, and I think that's why it's important.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and the first kind of 3 matches we've got, so Haiti on June the 13th next year, so that kickoff's at 9 o'clock in the United States, but here it's going to be 2 o'clock in the morning. And then Morocco on June the 19th is 6 o'clock Eastern time, but that's 11 o'clock here. And then the third match is Miami, which is on a Wednesday. Wouldn't want to be about 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, but I guess some people are. And that again, the kickoff's at 11 o'clock. So, this is, licensing hours are really kind of 1 o'clock in the morning at the latest. And I think it's really interesting that Neil Gray, the Health Secretary, was asked about it, and he said that the Scottish Government's going to work with them to do it, but licensing is devolved to each local authority. So I have emailed every single council in Scotland and asked them what the plan is. So we'll have something on that later in the week to see, what your local authority is going to do. Very interested if some allow it and some don't.
That would be difficult.
That would
very, very tricky. I suppose it depends on the surroundings and things like that. But I do think they might have to come to a common place with it, really.
Yeah, and I guess some places, I think rules will be slightly different across Scotland. So some places will apply for it and then the council will decide whether or not. So it'll be interesting to see that. We'll keep on top of this, obviously, because it's a very important thing that people in Scotland need to know. But as I said, it's a rare opportunity. Since the last time the Scotland were at the World Cup, I was 8 years old.
Yes, exactly. I don't. The first World Cup I remember was 2002, so I don't remember.
I don't remember
at all. Really, I was really, really quite young. So, yeah, I think it's really important, and I think that it'd be interesting to see if we get big screens set up in Glasgow Green or whatever. You know, that's the sort of thing that we need to be doing as well, I think, as well as pubs.
Yeah, and at least it'll be the height of summer if that does happen, because I would not be sitting outside Glasgow Green watching a big screen.
Absolutely not. No, I think there's a storm coming, isn't there?
Oh, yes, there's a lot of weather.
Storm Bram, I think. Yeah.
Storm Brown.
Bram.
Oh,
yeah, Bram, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, I think that's the name of it.
Yeah, we always have lots of weather mornings up here, I guess. Northernness. But yeah, we obviously will have updates on that stuff on our website. But that's all from us today. So thank you for listening and watching. And if you want to like and subscribe to support our work, that'd be great. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.